Hi there. So in this video, we're going to take a look at inflation, the module 14 on it. And what I'll say is that there's some really interesting little anecdotes throughout this module. This little first one about Paul Volcker is really good, and explaining why the current level of prices doesn't matter, but the rate of change does, and just some really great stuff throughout here. I like especially these anecdotes about hyperinflation and how does that affect people. One of my favorites in this whole thing is this little FYI, Israel's experience with inflation goes through point by point in the 1980s, how it affected Israel. It's very interesting, and some different kind of examples of different types of costs. So I strongly encourage it, right? Think about, skim through it, find something that you're like, oh, that's kind of neat. All right. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some of these extra practice problems for module 14. So check your understanding. Number one, the widespread use of technology has revolutionized the banking industry, making it easier for customers to access and manage their assets. Does this mean that shoe leather costs of inflation are higher or lower than they used to be? Explain. So this might be helpful if you think about it. Again, an example. My grandparents used to drive from Indiana to Florida in the 1940s and 1950s. And when they did that, they had to take an enormous amount of cash with them because it was very difficult to get money out of the bank. It was very difficult because banks didn't have these kind of national branches. It was just hard. And older people, even my dad who's in his 60s, they'll often carry more cash with them because it's not so easy, at least it wasn't when they were growing up, to access and manage their funds. At the same time, today, it's much easier for me to go online and switch money from one account to another and withdraw cash from an ATM and deposit money and things like that, using even mobile check deposits. So what we'd say is that there's not as much need to go and transact. So we'd say that this has decreased shoe leather costs. And there my colleagues go again. Oh my goodness, they are just dinging up a storm. I tell you, they like to text. And the explanation is just because less need to physically transact. And so that's been a good thing. We've seen kind of a reduction in that. Number two says most people in the United States have grown accustomed to a modest inflation rate of 2 to 3%. Who would gain, who would lose if inflation stopped for several years? Explain. So for the gainers, right, we would have gainers would be savers because their savings, right, go up in value. And in the sense that really maybe a better way to say that than savings going up in value is that inflation is not eroding the value of them. And lenders gain as well because their loans, right, get repaid with dollars that are worth more. And so that's hard to kind of understand unless you've lent somebody money, but it's the idea of saying they're going to repay you, and when they repay you, those dollars are worth more because there's no inflation. The losers, as a result, would be borrowers, right? And it's kind of the flip of that is that they have to repay with dollars that are worth more. And we would say that'll probably cover it. We'll just kind of stop there. So we could probably also, to the gainers, have said people on fixed incomes, right? And that would be people who are earning a set amount every single year. Let's take a look at these multiple choice questions. Which of the following is true regarding prices in an economy? An increase in the price level is called inflation. That's true. The level of prices doesn't matter. That is true, right? It doesn't matter how much everything costs right now. It matters how much it changes over time. And so we would say the rate of change in prices matters, which is statement 3. So all 3 of those are true. E. Number 3, or 2, if your nominal wage doubles at the same time that prices double, your real wage stayed the same. So where do we see that one? Not change. C. 3, if inflation causes people to frequently convert their dollars into other assets, the economy experiences shoe leather costs. That's this whole idea of constantly having to physically transact and constantly having to move money from one type of asset into another, convert your cash into an investment, take your cash out and buy something with it before it becomes worthless. All of that is shoe leather costs. Assets are just stuff that's worth something. So you have to quickly buy and transact, and you wear out your shoes. Number 4, because the dollars are used as the basis for contracts, inflation leads to unit of account costs is this one, because it's that idea of saying, well, I'll sell you a cell phone contract, right? A cell phone contract for X amount now it dings, of course, for X amount of dollars. Well, if you have really high inflation, it messes with that contracting ability. So we would say D. Number 5, changing the listed price when inflation leads to a price increase is menu costs. That's kind of the definition of menu costs. So, okay, now let's take a look at free response number 2, and we'll see what my colleagues are texting about. You borrow $1,000 for a year at 5% interest to buy a couch. That's a lot. Okay, that's an expensive couch. But I guess couches are expensive. I digress. You did not anticipate any inflation, but there's unexpected inflation of 5% over the life of your loan. Oh, well, good for you, actually. A, what was the real interest rate? Well, 0. You didn't pay any interest because the nominal, we'll kind of rewrite this, we've written it somewhere else as well, minus the inflation is the real. And your nominal rate was 5, minus 5 is 0. B, explain how you gained. Well, you didn't pay any interest. How about that? That's pretty good. Another way you could say that is that the dollars that you're repaying on the loan were worth less, but you got to repay them, right? So you got to repay your loan with dollars that weren't worth as much. Who lost? Well, your lender did, because they expected, or we think they expected, they expected to earn 5%. I think, the way this is saying, like, you didn't anticipate any inflation, maybe they didn't either. We don't really know what they expected the inflation rate to be, but we expected it. They probably didn't think it would be 5%, or at least, we'll just say, or at least they didn't get repaid as much as valuable dollars. So we know that they definitely didn't anticipate that much, right? So they got repaid in dollars that were worth less. All right, hopefully that helped you. See you next time.